Hey there, everybody. Welcome to week two of Health Psychology. Instructor Anderson here. I hope that week one went well for you and you were able to connect with the material and understand it, work towards, um, that relevant nature of when you learn, right? And I only want to see you further succeed in this work. And as always, reach out if you have any questions. I hope to do a Zoom session in the next week or two as an option. And of course, I have to work around the various time zones, right? So look for that information in the next week or two. All right, let's get right to it. In week two, I'm going to go over the information here. The unit of, well, beliefs, right? When we think about beliefs, we think about the system of beliefs. We think about how we, as people, as humans, um, connect to our experiences in relation to, obviously, we talk about health and the health related behavior. We look at how we are going to utilize our values, understand our values, work towards seeing when an event happens health related. Okay. What does our body, what does our mind connect to with that? Specifically, look at the belief systems, the psychological underpinnings of health related behavior, right? With our experiences, we're going to go over some different theories and then the psychological factors in the onset, maintenance, and the change. Here are your learning objectives for the unit. Here are your tasks for the unit. This is very important that you get these done. And again, as you know, in the beginning, the discussion unit is important. It's graded a little bit different than in some classes you might have had where it was graded differently, where you do more peer assessment, which you will get to that. But at the same time, you are expected to follow a certain objective, and then I will be grading you based on um, that participation. All right. And as always, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask. Okay, here are the reading assignment. I don't have it posted, but it is in the learning guide. These are some of the questions, and it specifically one of the readings is working to connect you with data. Right, when we think about data, we think of the numbers, we think of facts, right, and we think of the history. So if somebody is acting in such a way because of very broad XYZ, right? What does that behavior say? Is this something that we can expect with everybody? Does this mean that it happens with this gender, this sex? Does it mean it happens with this population of people? Now, again, those are very broad questions, but those are the things that data works to help us present, right? And we see the various, well, not the various, the variables involved. We see the elements, the environments, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more about that in this chapter. Here is your discussion for the week. Again, make sure your discussion is at least a minimum of 150 words and no more than 300 words. I'm a little bit more lenient on the over 300 words versus the 150 minimum. But if you don't reach that 150, even if you're at 149, my friends, I will um, I will not count it as 150. All right, I don't do any rounding up in this course. All right, here's your written assignment for the week. Again, I don't know why I put small like that, but again, you do have that information provided to you. 500 and 700 words should be the in between for your written assignment. Of course, pause the video if you would like. I'm trying to keep this video to 20 minutes at least, um, or at max, I guess you could say, as well. And the learning journal. These are my most favorite part of this course, of any course really, because I get to see your reflection. I get to see the evaluation, kind of your evaluation of the content. Okay, this week you're going to consider, and the keyword is reflect on the beliefs related to health in the general population where you live now or where you have previously lived. Consider common attributions people make about what causes health problems and the answers they might provide if asked why some people are healthy while other people are very unhealthy. Right? It's going to vary from country to country, and that's the beauty of this course with people all over the world. Right? Where I live in the United States, I live close to one of the states, Minnesota, which is connected to Canada, but it's in the north, Midwest region wise. And Minnesota is known as one of the healthiest states, if by I think one of the healthiest state in the U.S. And I'm going to talk about that in this course. Why? But what attributes contribute to that? Why is generally the states in the South, for example, Oklahoma, Alabama, considered more of the unhealthy states? What do they look at? What data do they look at? What again, what pieces do they measure that against? Now, this is where you get to connect your own beliefs, the same or different from those in your community. Why? Your thoughts are what I love to see. If your thoughts, again, I would say, no, your thoughts are not going to be wrong. Your thoughts are your thoughts. I want to see if you can dive into that and understand that. Minimum of 300 words, no more than 500. And again, I'm lenient on the 500. If you get, say, if you get 600, I'm really not going to be too, strict on that. I mean, I really want you to try to maintain that 500 words. But again, if you go to 299, I'm not going to mark you. I'm going to mark you on that, or a lack of mark you. So when we think about change, we think of these key pieces right here. Is there's a readiness to change, right? Do you have the resources and knowledge to make a lasting change successfully? Now, when we think of change in general, it's important to think about that. If you are unhealthy, and for example, we're in the winter months or we're out of the winter months where I live, right? We generally don't have a very um, I guess you could say flavorful spring. We don't have a spring, but we do, right? By the seasons, we do. We are in spring right now. But a lot of people are indoors a lot during the winter because our winters are harsh. They're very cold, right? We have days with the wind chill. We're negative 50 below zero. We're very cold. It can be very cold. There's a seasonal effectiveness disorder. People don't get outside. People become more depressed, anxious. There are various stressors that are involved with that. Now, ready, people are generally indoors more, so they're not going to be as active and running around and all those things, right? For example, now would they get to a point where they need to make changes? Is there the knowledge, the understanding, the resources, the connections to make a lasting change successfully? Now, there are barriers to change. Is there anything preventing you from changing? Right? And a lot of the times when we do connect it to health, it is going to be financials, right? Or other things. Maybe your lack of knowledge, maybe your lack of resources, and the likelihood of relapse. What might trigger a return to a former behavior? As a part of the human experience, we all have triggers. Some are negative triggers, and we have positive triggers. Some have more triggers because of those possible traumatic experiences, those past behaviors, their understanding, their lack of knowledge, right? And in that, right, could have a relapse. So those are things that we need to consider when we think of change. So there are various change. When we think of change in our body, there's a key role in your book. It starts with the key role for behavior, right? And I'm gonna put out this these percentages, and you can read it yourself. But it says about 50% of mortality from the 10 leading causes of death results from individual behavior, indicating that behavior and lifestyles have potentially major effect on longevity. It's exactly what it is, right? I know somebody right now in the ICU. They're in there because of kidney issues and um, other lifestyle choices, and they're in there because of their behavior, right? Now they're on the rebound, but at the same time, it's interesting to know and understand how they managed, how they looked at various things. Now, when we think about the various behaviors, we think about the individual beliefs about behaviors. We'll talk about your book talks about. Um, Before I get into this, I do want to get into this really quick here, but I want to make sure you understand. And actually, I might go back to a slide. Let me go and give my a marker a chance here to write. There are the individual behaviors, and I do apologize. I'm going to just use letters. So individual behaviors, we have the attitudes, right? We have attitudes. I'm going to just abbreviate this. Attitudes. We have beliefs and control. Okay. We also have the risk perception. I think of perceived, right? When we think about that, we have judgments, and in judgments are somebody's thoughts and processes with that. We have beliefs about confidence. Okay. So, and when we think about that, it's that inner ability, right, to achieve. Can I do this? Am I able to do this? When we think about that risk perception, okay, if I do this treatment, will it have more positives or will it have more negatives? And if people perceive, maybe based on, hey, here's the thing, smoking or alcohol, it hasn't hurt me before. Maybe I'm young, I can eat this and eat that. Well, there's this kind of this negative way of looking at it, right? Even though in their mind, right, the outcome could be positive. We look at the beliefs about control, which is an attempt to understand, right, the behaviors of other people's feelings and beliefs. Okay, it's how that individual you perceive the everyday experiences, and of course we understand the attitudes, right, as well. All right, let's go on to the next page here. This is where really the heart of um, health psychology comes in. There are the various stages. There are actually 6 stages, but your book talks about 5 stages, and I'll get to that. The first stage is pre-contemplation, right? In the characteristics, there's a lot of denial. There's the ignorance of the problem. Um, there's no intention to say, hey, I want to change. The strategies in that situation are working towards maybe more of the rewarding system, or rethinking your behavior, the analyzing your thoughts, right? All right. As and now psychology wants you to do and understand, um, is looking at the progression, right? We want to help people understand and analyze yourself as a person, right? And your actions. Why are you choosing this way? And we can go back to the first chapter. And another thing is we assess risks of the current behavior. If you go down X, Y, and Z road, what are the chances? What's the likelihood that you could face mortality sooner rather than later? All right. It generally is described as a very um, useful approach, okay, in this situation. Okay. The second stage is going to be contemplation. Okay. When we think about contemplation, now we're in this way. Wait a minute. Maybe we want to change. Okay. Maybe we want to change. Maybe we want to work towards understanding how my decisions are affecting other people. Right. Now, the strategies that health psychology looks at for the individual is we weigh the pros and cons of the behavior change. If I go in this direction, what is it going to cost me? What is it going to do for me down the road? And a lot of people might get frustrated at the idea, right? Where this is that conflicted emotions where, hey, I don't see change right now. It's not happening that quickly. We confirm the readiness, right? Verbally, that I can change. I can make this happen. And identify barriers to change. We want to be realistic. It's so very important that you're realistic in this. Why? Because we can't say that it's going to be a pretty perfect world, right? Okay. And we want to make sure that we have that. The next stage is preparation, which is experimenting with small changes. Small changes is the key in the model, the stages of change model. Collecting information about change, right? What's going to happen? What are we going to be knowledgeable about? What do I want to be knowledgeable about? Who are my resources? Who are my doctors? Asking questions, writing down your goals, asking questions, prepare a plan of action. That's so key, right? A plan of action is just that. It's saying that I'm going to make change by this time. Make a list of motivating statements, a list of motivating factors, people, resources in that. The next stage is action. Getting to work. You are actively now engaged in the new behavior. It's direct, right, towards the goal. I'm actually making this happen. I'm exercising more. I put my cigarettes away. I'm not spending money on cigarettes. I've reduced my sugar intake, right? Sugar for me personally is a very, very tough. I don't drink, I eat a lot of sugar. But for today at our school in the staff lounge, there was donuts. And I said to myself, man, that looks so good, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to eat it. I brought an apple. I brought other snacks. So I don't want to say forced because I love apples and I love eating veggies and stuff like that. Excuse me. But I made sure, and this is, but again, it's saying no and saying that out loud, like going to it, looking at the donuts, and I say no. It's going to feel good by the end of the day when I don't have this donut in my body. And I'm not saying you can't have donuts at any time, but at that time, I'm a sucker for sweets, and I've been trying to reduce my sugar intake. Reward your successes. Seek out social support. Right? I don't know what that reward is. That's something that you have to be able to understand. What would be best for you? And another key stage is that maintenance and maintaining the new behavior. Right? Avoiding temptation. So if I'm on a sugar um, seclusion, if I'm on a sugar, I guess you could say diet, or moderation of my sugar intake, I have to say, okay, I don't want to do those artificial sugars, right? I know that like pineapples and certain foods have sugar, right? But I'm going to avoid donuts. And maybe in that situation, I want to be more specific. Maybe I want to say, here's the thing, I don't want a big donut, but maybe I'll stick to one of those small packages of sugar of cookies once a week instead of having a donut twice a week, right? You want to make those goals realistic at the same time. Now, again, this stages of change model can be used in many different ways, but in health psychology, this is what they focus on using. Avoiding that temptation goes back to that direct link of action. What are you doing to avoid temptation? Communication out to people as well is going to be key. Developing coping strategies for temptation, right? Anytime you might have an urge to do something, to maybe possibly there's a chance of relapse. Maybe you call that support person. There are people that struggle with not smoking. It is not just something that people can just stop and say, I'm done. There is an addiction, right? Just like alcohol, like other things too, as well. So what it does, and that's the situation, in those goals, you are trying to set up that system of people for support. And remember to reward yourself, right? Maybe it is if I, having like there's these called these outshine bars, and they're fruit bars, they're frozen and stuff, and there's not a lot of sugar in them, and all natural fruit. They're delicious. They're delicious. And so for me, it would be, hey, instead of a donut as a dessert, I'm going to have a watermelon outshine bar, right? So even something like that, or I'm going to treat myself to a nice dinner. We're going to go out. We're going to go out for a dinner. If I can go a whole week, we're doing something, right? But the sixth stage is not marked in your book, but there is a piece in it. It's called relapse. This is where people can relapse, get to a point of being disappointed. It's exactly what it is. You relapse. You kind of go back to the beginning again. There is frustration. There's feelings of failure. You're going to be emotionally mined in that way that you act, right? You're going to be angry, and you might be angry around people around you. That's why it's important to have that support network around you, because you want to be able to communicate to those people, right, in those situations. If I relapse, what can you do to help me? Then it's going back to identifying those triggers that lead to relapse, recognizing barriers to success, reaffirm your goal and commitment to change, going back and saying, what did not work in this situation? We're human, but remember you're human, right? It's all about that growth mindset. Another piece in your book that talks about is called the health belief model, and it helps to predict behavior as a result of core set beliefs which have been redefined over the years as you become obviously an adult, right? You're surrounded by many different people, situations, environments, experiences, right? In that situation, the model believes that these core beliefs should look at kind of the likelihood that a behavior will occur. Okay. So in those situations, here's what's going to go on is these are modifying factors. When you think about modifying factors, it's relevant that doctors and medical professionals would look at something like this. And you yourself have these elements, right? And understanding and through those experiences and understanding that you have been given enough or maybe not enough. So the individual belief, so let me go back to this, these modifying factors, these are connected right here to perceived benefits of preventative action, right? But in going back to the overall model with the individual beliefs, your actual belief on will I get this disease? Am I able to make the change? And if I behave and act and understand in such a way, will I go towards not understanding? Or will I go for my regular screenings? Will I try to gain knowledge, right? Will I have that open mind to be able to say, well, are my chances high? Are my chances low? Even the severity of the illness, right? So perceived barriers, preventative action, perceived self-efficacy, and then self-efficacy is going to be really key. So that is your really your inner workings of that belief system of I can do it. I have the skill, I have the knowledge. You can either have high self-efficacy or you can have low self-efficacy, right? Being able to say, yes, I can change. I'm able to challenge myself. Okay. There's a lot of pieces of motivation in this model as well, right? And so a lot of times we'll look at these modifying factors, going back to those modifying factors, and being able to understand of somebody of a certain gender, a geographic location, will they have the means to understand what it takes to make this happen? Or if there is a barrier in some minds and some ideas of education, even just general health knowledge, right? There could be a language barrier as well. The ability to, with the income and the status of that, will they have the idea of, okay, to one, the barrier might look large, but it's not that big, right? We can get them help. Or maybe to them and their perceived way of looking at it is it looks large and it is large but in reality. But it is all about that perceived way. And that contributes to the individual behaviors, right? The next piece in your chapter talks about the theory of, or not the theory, the protection motivation theory. Theory is a big part of psychology, and it was developed to not only include those various elements we just talked about, those factors, but particularly fear, right, or threat, is to include a way of kind of motivating that emotion to kind of get to the surface, to change, right? Whether it be those severity of someone's intentions to go in one direction, right? So we have under the threat, we have the perceived severity plus the perceived vulnerability. This is serious. Your chances of getting this disease are high because of your age. Wait a minute. Now, now, wait a minute. Can we see them and understanding? Do they understand that? Do they have the ability to cope? Do they have the ability to have the resources, the support? Do they know what coping is? What kind of coping mechanisms are there in certain situations? And it's really important to understand coping, right? Because there are various ways, and we can look at something like constructive coping, which is a healthy effort of how to um, look at a situation that could be, yes, wow, this person has this disease, or they're struggling with this crisis. And it can also be involved with mental health too, as well, right? And perceived self efficacy. Am I able to do it? Am I able to run through this? So, in this is the behavior intention. What are they intending to do? This direction or that direction? And then we have to look at the actual behavior, okay, of the individual. The theory of planned behavior is the next motivation theory. Um, and in your book, it talks about its extensive use to examine predictions of behaviors. And this is interesting, it was a central debate within social psychology, excuse me, concerning the relationship between attitudes and behavior. We go back to those attitudes piece, people, right? So we have these beliefs about behaviors. And today, in your discussion assignment, in your learning journal, excuse me, you are going to be really bringing out your belief systems, and not only your belief systems, but other people's belief systems, right? We have various communities, we have various cultures, we have various communities. I think I said that. Your religious affiliations. There are so many different pieces in that. When we talk about birth control, when we talk about mental health, right? I work in the field that works on the idea of through mental health, and having those discussions and trying to understand it fully when I'm working with students. Even the idea of anxiety, when people have anxiety issues. There are people that don't believe in anxiety. There are people that just say it's just another level of stress. Without going too much into the detail of stress and how it affects your physical health, right? We will get into that in a future chapter. So the theory of planned behavior um, really emphasizes, right? Really emphasizes um, those combinations, right? About if you get X, Y, and Z disease, this condition, this way of something that affected your health, what do you believe the outcome could be, right? What do you believe the system, or not the system, the outcome could be in the long run? Now we look at the beliefs about important attitudes of other people's behaviors of it. We look at the combination of motivation, the internal and the external control factors. So the various models that we've talked about in this chapter so far, um, some have been argued not to be as effective when looking at understanding health. Some people have looked at it as too complicated in nature, and you might look at all of these and say, I've had students in the past saying the theory of planned behavior seems a little bit more far-fetched. It's important to the motivational theory to put fear into people to make change, right? But this one really is, there's a combination, right? They all kind of play together in a lot of ways. Okay. For example, I think that's really important that you look at your book. It talks about an example with alcohol consumption, right? And it talks about um, if an individual believed that reducing their alcohol intake would make their life more productive and be beneficial to their health, attitude to the behavior, and believe that the important people in their life wanted them to cut down, which would be the subjective norm, the subjective norm, how we behave, right? In addition, believe that they were capable, the capacities, the capability, the resources available, capable of drinking less alcohol due to their past behavior, an evaluation of internal and external factors, then this would predict high intentions to reduce alcohol intake, which would be that behavior intention. But then we look at the actual behavior control. Okay. All right. So the perceived of how one looks at it right here to how maybe others look at it, right? Okay. So the chart might be a little complicated in nature in the way you look at it itself. But I'm not a big fan. I look at various teaching resources, and when I put this together, when I read it and study it, um, I just kept using this one. Number one, because it challenges my mind a little bit to try to look at, understand it in a different way. But some people don't like to look at it this one too as well. So, all right. So I'm going to say that stop sharing. And so I know this stuff information. If I look through the book, um, there is various things beyond the chapter or in the chapter beyond what I just said. Talks about eating behavior, talks about the cognitions model, the developmental model, the social learning and associative learning. Let me really quickly just say this. And we look at eating, the eating piece I think is really important as well because um, you know what we eat matters, right? Not only for our physical health, but when we think about today, I was doing a lesson on um, feeding our brain knowledge, but also what else our brain needs, right? The glucose, the amino acids, the proteins, all that good stuff. Um, but I think it's important when we think about the various models, we look at the various theories that we just talked about, and the book does do a good job about um, helping you connect those models to the theories, right? But in particular, okay, um, our cognitions. Think about that base, right? Have a lot to do with even those foundations have a lot to do with our attitudes, right? In our perceptions of what's in front of us. I take this food, I have this food, right? Okay. Okay. For example, simple, what does it do when I intake? Now, my attitude towards it in that situation is going to be far different than anybody else's. Okay. Or just the idea of eating enough veggies, eating enough fruit, eating enough reds and greens, right? It is working to help us in those models of cognition understand more about how one takes that next step. The developmental model are learned from a range of sources, including, I'm going to read this. The beliefs are learned from a range of sources of parents, peers, siblings, friends, and the media, right? That's developmental model. Click, 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 right? Through time, when we go to a young age, now in between, right? That developmental model, who was in your life, who was in your experiences for you to be able to understand or not understand or even connect you with food, right? There's a show called My 600-Pound Life, and I find the show fascinating. I find the show fascinating for the fact that um, it is an epidemic itself, but working to understand the people in that show. If you ever watched it, I would encourage you to watch it. And I say watch it with caution. Here's the reason: is some people I've talked to about that, they said, "Wow, whoa, that person, how could that's disgusting." I would want you to not have that mindset right away. I'd want you to have it not at all. Is just like anybody, it's being empathetic. It's trying to understand their story, and they do a really fantastic job of telling their story to why they are at this point. And none of the people in that show, now this is my belief and my through my understanding and education and such, that none of them, but I think it's the reality too of the show, none of them just ate because they wanted to eat because they loved food. They love food, but not because they just loved it and they just wanted to eat, right? There's a reason why, and they do a fantastic job of telling that. And it works towards helping them uh, how they are, how their connection to food and what that means. Uh, And it's a good point in the exposure piece of the developmental model with how we expose the understanding of food. And in that show, it talks a lot about their childhood and what they did and how they were exposed and how they had built a relationship. And sometimes it was only a solid relationship with food. Okay. Social learning, um, symbol of that, right? In our connection of how we prefer food, right? In connection to our social surroundings. All right. The book goes into a weight concern model of eating behavior, and it does a great job connecting to the other theories. So I try not to put this video too long, but it looks like I went a little bit over, and I was trying to bombard you. It's. I love this stuff. I love the information about psychology in general, in specific. Um, well, not in specific. I love psychology, and I think it's the beauty of what it can do in understanding our health psychology itself. So if you have any questions, let me know. Welcome to week 2. Hope you enjoy. Let me know if you need anything. Bye bye.